So we have 3 strategies that these two have identified as strategies to do more with less, and we're just going to jump right into the first one. So the first one is, how can you do more with less? Number 1, identify trends in new or adjacent markets and break into those to get some low-hanging fruit. So I am going to turn it over to Brady first to tell us a bit more about this strategy.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and when it comes to identifying new markets and new strategies for those markets, I think it's really important to identify what your key message is and what problem you're trying to solve. So when you're thinking about where there's opportunity, knowing what your customer base and what they're driving towards is really important to understand where you can take it elsewhere. And thinking about that specifically with Salesloft, obviously you all should be aware or are likely using Salesloft in some way, shape, or form. But it's mainly used for prospecting and advancing the deal cycle. What is a commonality that most reps will run into? They're trying to reach out to multiple people and have a consistent process. So with Salesloft, there's different ideas. There are nonprofits that are trying to draw on money. It could be a political campaign that's trying to drive towards performance. But really taking that and stepping outside of your most common used area and aligning that. The other thing I would say before I kick it back off to Brian here, is identifying where you're winning. So finding out the close win rates, your deal velocity, knowing how much work and effort it could go into particularly the markets that you're playing in right now. Knowing where to spend time and where to go elsewhere is really important if you're going to be taking that lead.
That is awesome. And before I kick it to Brian, I'm going to share like a little anecdotal story I remember from a sales rep a few years ago at Vidyard who started to notice the data was telling her that she had a few wins in the roofing industry, which is really outside of ICP for us. And so she, instead of just ignoring that and thinking it was a coincidence, she kind of dug into the data and then started to run a specific campaign using Salesloft to roofing companies. And she landed a significant number of roofing logos that are still really healthy customers today. So I think that's just a great example of how to find some low-hanging fruit in a non-traditional industry. But Brian, like, tell us tactically how you do this as an SDR.
On the SDR side of things, I can't go through the last 20 deals that I closed because I haven't closed any. So the first thing that I very much have to do in order to try and book these meetings, and if everyone's going after the same ICP, it's much better for me to be going after someone else, someone novel. I'm going after roofing companies after today's conversation. Who knows? But the main thing that you need to do as an SDR, as a frontline rep, is actually keep on top of what the other reps are doing. You need to keep an eye on what is closing. There's a couple of different reasons for that, but the main thing that I use we have a Slack channel internally where anything that's closed, when it's closed, the deal notes get pulled into that Slack channel, and that is the first thing that I look at every day. Reason being, Jack Nico, one of our most successful AEs in EMEA, 4 out of the top payment fintech companies in EMEA. How he did that is he got one and then sent SDRs like me to go after the rest. Specific use case. He knew the problem in the industry. He knew what the ICP was. He knew who the companies would be. And my job as an SDR is to take his knowledge and to take the in-depth knowledge that he had over a 6 to 9 month deal cycle and condense it into a 100-word email to a CRO or a 45-second video. And to try and take that knowledge. But if I had to go and do that myself, then I'd be spending all my day researching and not making videos or emailing. So leverage the AEs, find out what they're saying on their closed won deals, and then use your SDR experience, Salesloft or Vidyard, to push that out to the right people, knowing it's the right message. That's how I would operationalize that.
I really love that, Brian. And I think that sometimes a notion I hear about sales engagement platforms is it's just spraying the same message, but I think you highlight a really great point that it's definitely not. It's like introducing automation to the process, but you have done so much research on the back end with like reading the win notes or interviewing the AEs to then create a really targeted message to this group of individuals, and your conversion rate's just going to be so much higher as a result of all that work you did up front.
If you're using sales engagement as a marketing automation tool, then you've bought the wrong thing.
That's a great one. I think you've said that before, Brian. That's a great point.
I would add, so both Brian and I attack it from different perspectives. Obviously, Brian's there in the field doing what needs to be done each day. The main point is when you have a tough market and when it's challenging, is putting the prep work and curating something that's going to get them to respond. Right. The big approach that we ran through in the past decade is how much can we get out there. Now everybody is just so bombarded with so much content. It's more about what specifically you can make that's going to be relevant or personalized that will get them to take action or even think about you in a way that is able to help them.
Yes, 100%. What's that saying? If you ask me to cut down a tree in 6 hours, I'll spend 5 hours sharpening my saw. A lot of prep goes into the work. That's awesome. Well, okay. So the second strategy that we talked about was operationalizing intent signals, which is a huge theme. So operationalizing these intent signals to focus your sales plays on prospects that are most likely to buy. So I'm going to start with Brady again. Tell us a bit about how you think about intent signals.
Yeah, there's so much data and so many different data points that you have access to as a seller these days, and really depending on what platform you have access to, it's identifying where those signals are coming from and what are valuable. What I think is one that's underutilized and is really common for most sales reps is LinkedIn Sales Nav, specifically figuring out who you've talked to, who's had interest, who you've won deals with and who you've lost deals with, and organizing your list to identify changes. As an example, let's say I'm looking to try and we'll say sell LinkedIn Sales Nav to a rep or to an organization. There are filters for recent funding events. There may be somebody that I talked to recently that ended up at that organization that was in favor but wasn't able to get the deal through at the organization they left. Right, being aware of where there are commonalities and keeping track of that in a way that when that does happen, you're able to take advantage. Then from there, and Brian will be able to touch on this as well, is figuring out what the systematic approach is. So do you have rules of engagement for a specific change, like a new role? And it's not just the generic congratulations on your new role, right? Is it something that's impactful? But making sure that you have a plan in place, so when that does happen, you're not left scrambling, taking 24 hours or 48 hours to make that note, that it's there ready for you.
I love that. And I love LinkedIn Sales Navigator. One of my resolutions was to open it every morning, first thing in the morning, and look through my digest. They do a great job of giving you a digest that you can sort of prune and adjust as you see the results that it gives you. But I also, well, if anyone is not subscribed and is a user of Sales Navigator, they have a great newsletter as well, where they give you really tactical tips on here's a list you can build, or like Brady mentioned, here's a list. I get a list of champions that were at a company that was a customer of yours that have moved roles. So you want to find a way to find intent signals that does not take you like 7 hours to get to the answer. It's like if it can be served to you and you can quickly do something with that, that's so important. So tell us a bit.
One more, just because you made me think of this too. If you're not currently searching for a job, there are filters and there are alerts that you can set up via LinkedIn. So if you realize that somebody you're selling into has a job posting or opening, what a powerful message specifically. Hey, I realize that you're looking for this specific role, but what if my product could do this instead?
Ooh.
Think about that as another way to try and trick the system to get it working for you.
And you know what? Right now, that's probably a very timely message, because people are looking to really improve efficiency and productivity with the headcount they have. And if you can genuinely help them, that might really hit a nerve with them.
For sure.
Brian, tell us a bit about.
Yeah, as a front, convince people that they need to make their existing sellers more efficient rather than hiring a bunch more. These intent signals are actually what I build my entire on. Now, we can talk about sort of trigger templates and all. That's I do a whole session, and it's an hour and a half on trigger templates and how they work. The point of this as an SDR is knowing what those intent signals are, and then knowing how that relates to the people that you're reaching out to. So I call them trigger templates. But essentially, there's a bunch of reasons as to why somebody would buy a tool like Salesloft. find them quickly, hit them with the right message in the right place at the right time, and be personalized with it. So 3 examples that I use sales is, if you're hiring sellers, you probably need to make your sales team more efficient. You need to ramp those new sellers quickly. If you've got high growth in your company, probably need to make your existing sellers more efficient because you've got high sales targets. And if you're going through a funding round, your CEO has definitely saddled your VP sales target. You need to make your existing sellers more efficient. So instead of me getting a list of 1,000 accounts and just going to everyone's website and trying to figure out, what do I talk to this person about? What's unique about this company? How do I be personalized? And when I spend 5 minutes on it and can't find anything, I send them something generic. Instead of doing that, I work backwards. And I go to Sales Navigator and I try and find all the companies in my region that are growing. So headcount growth in the last 6 months, or hiring SDRs, or funding round. And for each of those, then I know showing intent signals that mean that they probably have a problem that I can solve. And I can go straight into them and go, hey, look, we're wrong about this, but you've just gone through a funding round. Companies after a Series B typically need to triple their ARR within the first 15 months if they're going to go for 18. I get the feeling you've got that target now. Can we have a conversation about how Salesloft can help you triple your pipeline in the next 6 months? I send VP of sales who's just gone through a funding round, and they reply, instead of a bunch of other SDRs who say, hey, you've just got a bunch of money, can I? And it's a completely different way of generating your hypothesis. But knowing what these pieces of intent are from your sales ops team, the internal systems, and being able to tell your leaders, it's important that I know this. Be personalized and relevant at scale. I don't need to necessarily include in my message what college they went to, but I do need to include and being able to sort of go forward with that and then build the process around that is something that you might find quite useful.
Brian, I love that idea that you've like kind of reverse engineered and backed into it versus going, I think we've all been there before, where you open up someone's website, you open up a few more tabs, you start to do some research, you find something interesting, or maybe you don't. Whereas it sounds much more efficient and effective if you first, again, do some work, some prep work. That might be interviewing people internally, asking sales ops and marketing and a variety of stakeholders, what are intent signals that have converted to closed won opportunities? And then you go and attack that in your territory. And again, the conversion rates. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I think our internet has sort of dropped slightly in here. I'm the last one left in the building. But what I will say, I think, on that is you can then build your plays around that. So if you go and look at a company and on day 3 triggers or 3 hypotheses, that day cadence across 5 channels sorted. 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 are going to be hypothesis number 1. If they don't respond, you've got 2 more. So if a company is growing, hiring, and has a funding round, that's not just 1 email, 1 cold call, and a message, and a LinkedIn message. That's 3 different, using all of those different channels, hitting them with the similar messages. And if they don't respond to you after 3 separate hypotheses across at least 3 different channels, then you've probably got the wrong idea and there wouldn't be a good fit anyway. But it means you get to be very personalized and relevant to what's happening to the company level at scale without having to spend all your time on research. And you don't have to use a tool like Salesloft for that. But if you want to, I will sell it to you.
I think that's great. I think that gives a lot of people on this call probably, I know it gives me some ideas of like some homework you can do after this call to improve your chance of success when it's a little bit more tough out there lately. And so this could just help you be a bit more efficient. Very cool. Thank you both for sharing. We are getting into our final tactic for our conversation, and that is multi-threading effectively and building demand by creating a groundswell in these target accounts. So Brady, tell us about, again, in your role, how you think about multi-threading a deal and the importance of that.
Yeah, and that's such a big topic about finding and identifying the people that 1 will help you through the sales cycle, but 2 will be a detractor. And we've all been there, right? You get to the finish line, there's a bunch of red lines that drop on your table. It's the end of the quarter, or there's no way we're going to get this done. Procurement just came back and said we need a 10% cut. There's a lot that we really need to be focused on, but simply asking ahead of time, or within that first conversation about who else we need to identify as a potential stakeholder. If you're missing that step, you really have little chance of expecting what's going to be coming, in the next month or two. There are a couple ways to think about the groundswell technique as well. Number one, multi-threading. Obviously, when you get to the later stages, you need to identify who's going to be there. But there's a ton of opportunity for you as a seller to figure out what the problem is within that specific company, and talk to the people that it's addressing, or that are addressing that issue most often. Pain usually sits with lower mid-level employees, and if you're able to suss that out and draw a specific conclusion and bring that to the leadership group, you have an opportunity to do a couple things. One, be the voice that maybe isn't getting to them. Two, offering a solution to the problem that you've identified. And three, you're going to help identify who specifically can help solve this problem. And I think it's really important. And one thing specifically, when we're thinking about using technology and doing more with less, if you have the ability to record phone calls or record your live demos, being able to identify specific stakeholders or questions that might come up that you want to introduce somebody else into the sales cycle, have the ability to edit that message and use it as a follow-up, or introduce in a way that does draw the right person to the conversation, is an incredibly valuable tactic that I hope people are utilizing today. But through Vidyard or Salesloft, obviously, you have the ability to do that and be really specific about what message you're trying to deliver.
That is awesome, Brady. And I know you mentioned, the pain is often felt in like management level. And when we were talking about this session before, or last week, you had mentioned like, don't shy away from speaking to that level to really identify what is the pain. And I think sometimes you hear that people don't want to spend time on the lower level. They want to go right to a VP, for instance, but it's so much more impactful if you can collect some real challenges that specific company is having, and then percolate it up, sort of. So I think that's a really great point about multi-threading. Brian, I know you must have a different perspective on this, given you're an SDR. So I want to hear about multi-threading for you.
I can't multi-thread a deal because I cut off after the demo stage. I can't multi-thread all the way to the end. But what I do actually when it comes to multi-threading, and when we were chatting about this in our prep session, I had a very different understanding of what multi-threading is to someone like Brady, who's my multi-threading is getting the end users of a tool like Salesloft excited about the idea before or in the process of me going to their managers. So it's not just me coming in at the top of their email inbox. It's the people that they speak getting excited about it. So on my tier 1 accounts, on my very, very high level, these are the ones that I absolutely really want to talk to because they're a good fit. I actually start with what I have known as a bottom-up cadence, and it is emails and LinkedIn messages to SDRs and sales managers. And I just ask them, hey, look, seller to seller, I'm trying to sell you a sales tool that will help you book more meetings. Can I? I'll buy you lunch. Can I chat about what's selling is like in your company? And what I've learned from things like this is there's a lot of VPs that will respond to something like a message from me saying we have outreach, or we have Gong, or we have Groove, or they have that sales engagement box ticked. And what I do is I talk to the reps, and if I can, instead of replying to them a VP or anything like that, instead of leading with, oh well, I guess you've got that box ticked, if I can learn from the reps that they're not using the tool, or efficiently, or it constantly breaks, or nothing to do with the tool itself, but the fact that they have one set of functionality but don't have another set of functionality, then that tells me the message that I need to lead with when I go to the VP or a CRO or a CEO. There was someone recently, and I was chatting with them, and I targeted the CEO, and he just flat out replied no. He didn't even watch the video that I sent him. He just went, no, I know Salesloft. But I had already put his SDRs into a bottom-up cadence, so I kept going, and I talked to one of them, and I learned that they were using HubSpot Sales, which is a fantastic add-on to, and that they and that coaching was a big priority for their managers. CEO in our CRM, and I noticed that he had worked at a company in the past that had used Salesloft, but it was 5 years ago when we did not have call intelligence and did not hook up to HubSpot. So his understanding of Salesforce or his understanding of Salesloft was that we were just a cadencing tool that didn't hook up to HubSpot. Look, this is the piece of information that I know you need to know. This is what we can have a more educated conversation with, and because of research, he sent me straight down to his VP of sales, and now it's an opportunity internally. I had to do talk to one of the SDRs. My job then is to pick up those extra pieces of information and piece them together, and then I send that to an AE, and he records all, and like he says, puts up a slide. The first slide he'll present to that CEO is a clip from the SDR saying, "Yeah, doesn't get us X results," or "We don't have a tool that helps us with coaching." It's not necessarily that the CEO was going wrong, or that any of the tools that were wrong or not good for them. It was that they didn't know what else was out there. My job as an SDR is to figure that out. So when I talk about multi-threading, I talk about bottom up, at the right level with the right message, because I'm just throwing darts at a dartboard in the dark at the minute, and we just hope this kind of shines a light on it and kind of gives us an extra place to throw a dart. Maybe we'll find something that sticks.
Yeah, and you bring a great point up that, what, we as sellers, we know what our typical challenges that we solve are, and you could do the easy route of saying, I'm going to guess that they're struggling with X, but you risk the chance that the CEO is going to say, no, that's not interesting at all. But if you can get the soundbite from someone who is feeling the pain, and that takes a bit more time and effort, you've got to run a bottom-up cadence, you have to have those interviews, you have to put the time in, but then you've got something compelling, and then you're going to get someone to take a bit more time to listen to what you have to say. So I think that's a great way to multi-thread as an SDR.
And Brian, here, if you're thinking about this too, and all of you guys think about this, if you can get the initiatives of the company from somebody at the lower level and get them to actually talk about the specific thing that they're trying to drive, you bring that to a C-suite, and it has their mission or their value statement or something that they're trying to push from the top down that the rep is struggling with. That is so powerful. And thinking about leading that message in with I talked to so and so, and they said that this initiative that you're very focused on is not going to be hit because of X, Y, and Z. I don't know how many C-suites are not going to respond to a message like that, honestly.